With advanced drilling technology, it's possible to drill deep into the Earth's crust. It begs the question, have human beings drilled deeper into the Earth than the deepest areas in nature? Today we're going to find out. Here are the top 15 deepest points on Earth. Number 15. Dead Sea. The Dead Sea, which lies between Israel and Jordan, is renowned for its historical links with ancient civilizations and the unusually salty water that led to it becoming one of the world's first health resorts during Roman times. But what most people don't realize is that it's also the deepest exposed point on land in the world. In fact, it's because of its location in the Jordan Rift Valley that it became like no other lake on Earth. And this is also the reason why it may completely vanish within the next century. The surface of the Dead Sea is 1,412 feet below sea level, and at its lowest point the water is 997 feet deep. Apart from a couple of springs that are thought to feed the lake from below, the only water that's added to the lake is from the River Jordan, and there's no natural outlet at all. This means that the only way for the water to leave is through evaporation, and it leaves behind all of the compounds it contains in the lake, which is why the Dead Sea contains such high levels of salt. Increased water usage upstream of the Jordan River means that in recent decades, far less has reached the Dead Sea, and it has shrunk an astonishing amount. In 1930, it covered an area of 410 square miles, but now it's just 234 square miles in size, with some estimates suggesting that at this rate, it could all be gone within 50 years. Without the water, it'll become much clearer how deep a valley the Dead Sea is within the Earth's surface, and it'll become the lowest point on the planet that is possible to walk to. Number 14. Denali Glacier, Antarctica. Very little is really known about the geography of Antarctica, both because of its distance from the other land masses of the world and because of the hostile environment that sees temperatures plunge below freezing point and mean that the landscape is covered in thick sheets of ice. Improvements in technology have, however, allowed scientists to scan beneath the ice to learn more about the bedrock that lies below. And recently, it was discovered that the world's deepest point on land actually lies beneath a giant glacier. In 2019, it was announced that hidden under the Denali Glacier on the east of the continent is a huge trench that plunges more than 2 miles below sea level, which has been formed over hundreds of thousands of years by the erosion of the moving ice sheet. Not only was it an important discovery that showed land can be carved much deeper than had previously been thought, but research like this helps to explain the movement of ice in Antarctica and helps researchers understand why some glaciers are more resilient to increasing climate temperatures than others. Number 13. Sunda Trench. The Sunda Trench, which is also sometimes referred to as the Javan Trench, is an underwater canyon that's near the island of Sumatra in the Indian Ocean. It had long been known that a trench was present there, but it was only in the 1950s that a research trip determined quite how deep it was by using a combination of bomb sounding and echo train analysis techniques. The trench itself is around 2,000 miles long and is formed on the boundary where the Australian Capricorn tectonic plate is moving beneath the Eurasian plate. Sat on the edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire, the deepest part of the Sunda Trench is 23,920 feet below sea level, which is the lowest known point in the whole of the Indian Ocean. Due to its position on the edge of two plates, the trench sees high levels of volcanic and earthquake activity, and it's there that the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake emanated from. Research following that event, which measured a magnitude of between 9.1 and 9.3, showed substantial changes in its structural integrity. And now it's a focal point of the tsunami warning systems in the region, because in all likeliness, it'll be the location where the next mega earthquake takes place. In 2019, Victor Vescovo made the first manned descent to the bottom of the Sunda Trench as part of the 5 Deeps exploration, and has hoped future scientific research will help further understand plate tectonics and prevent disasters like the one in 2004 from ever happening again. Number 12. The Cayman Trough. The Cayman Trough is a narrow stretch that lies in the seabed between the Cayman Islands and Jamaica, and is the deepest spot in the Caribbean. It's been an important tectonic site for more than 50 million years, and this is where the Caribbean plate moves beneath the North American plate. This continual activity means that the trough is widening by about half an inch every year, and at its deepest it reaches 25,217 feet below sea level. What's of particular interest about the Cayman Trough is that the floor is covered in black smokers, which are hydrothermal vents where superheated water from beneath the Earth's crust is released into the ocean. At more than 3 miles beneath the surface, they are the deepest known smokers in the world, and the water leaving them has been measured in excess of 840 degrees Fahrenheit, which also means they're some of the hottest known undersea vents. This warmth in what otherwise would be almost freezing waters means that there's a surprising amount of life deep within the Cayman Trench, and a recent expedition discovered several new species, including an eyeless shrimp with a specialized organ on its back to detect light. The trough has also had a role in entertainment and is where the 1989 movie The Abyss was set. Of course, there's no suggestion that alien objects do exist down there, but the life forms that live there are definitely otherworldly. Number 11. Peru, Chile, Atacama Trench. The Peru-Chile Trench, which is also known as the Atacama Trench, is around 100 miles off the coast of Peru and Chile in the Pacific Ocean, and is where the Nazca tectonic plate is sliding beneath the South American plate. Because of the interaction between the plates, there are actually two ridges within the trench, the Nazca Ridge and the Juan Fernandez Ridge, and the trench's topography is unusual in comparison to the others. As it's relatively close to the coastline and oceanic currents lead towards it, the bottom of the trench is filled with sediment that's up to 1.6 miles thick, so it appears to be flat. Scanning technology has, however, been used to learn more about its dimensions, and its deepest point was found to be a place called Richards Deep, which is 26,460 feet below sea level. The trench itself is 3,666 miles long and around 40 miles wide, and covers a huge area of 230,000 square miles. The plate activity that was responsible for forming it also has major impacts on nearby regions, and was the cause of at least 12 major earthquakes and associated tsunamis within the past century, meaning it could well be the epicenter of another one in the future that could have repercussions for communities across South America. Number 10. Japan Trench. The Japan Trench, which stretches between the Kuril Islands and the Isul Islands, is a relatively small trench at just 497 miles long. But the activity that takes place has created some of the most destructive geological events in living memory. The trench has formed where the Pacific Plate subducts beneath the Okhotsk Plate, which is a microplate that was once part of the North American Plate and is thought to be at least 20 million years old. Unusually, because there are so many plates interacting with each other in the region, the trench is connected with several others, and while it's not the deepest of the canyons in that part of the ocean, it is one point where it's 26,398 feet below sea level. Amazingly, expeditions have found life thriving in the Japan Trench, such as a shoal of snailfish that, when they were filmed in 2008, were the deepest fish to have ever been seen at the time. But the reason why it's one of the most studied trenches in the world is because of the tectonic activity that takes place there. The plates move at up to 4 inches a year against each other, and as a result are the main cause of earthquakes and tsunamis in northern Japan. The megathrust Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in 2011 that measured a magnitude 9 came from the Japan Trench, and there have been further 13 significant quakes over the past 100 years. The seafloor of the trench is now, therefore, covered in hundreds of seismometers and accelerometers to measure even the slightest of movements, with the hope that these will provide valuable extra minutes of warning before any future event may hit the mainland. Number 9. South Sandwich Trench. The South Sandwich Islands are some of the most remote and inhospitable islands in the world, located around 430 miles to the southeast of the island of South Georgia, and at the lowermost point of the Atlantic Ocean. They are so far away from civilization that there's no permanent population that lives there, and the oceans around them are relatively unexplored. There is one structure that's known about, however, that lies around 62 miles off the eastern shore of the islands. Known as the South Sandwich Trench, it contains the second deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, and because it stretches so far south over the 60th parallel, it also contains the deepest known point in the Southern Ocean. The absolute lowest region of the trench is known as Meteor Deep, named after the German exploration mission that first discovered it, and has been measured as reaching 26,909 feet beneath sea level. But in a recent trip by the Five Deeps expedition in 2019, another recess was found nearby that thought to potentially be a further 210 feet deep. The part of it that lies within the Southern Ocean has a deepest point, known as Factorian Deep, that's 24,388 feet below sea level, and is the only known place in the world that lies within a trench in sub-zero temperatures. The trench itself is 600 miles long and was formed on the boundary between the southernmost part of the South American Plate, where it's moving beneath the South Sandwich Plate. The volcanic activity that this produces is also what created the South Sandwich Islands at the surface, and the volcanoes there are still very much active. We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Puerto Rico Trench. The 497-mile-long Puerto Rico Trench is located on the boundary between the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and is where the North American plate is moving in a westerly direction beneath the Caribbean plate, which is moving eastward. This plate activity is what explains the presence of volcanoes on the island and in oceans around the South Caribbean, and it's a region that's prone to powerful seismic activity that researchers fear will one day trigger a huge tsunami that will devastate the nearby islands. Within the trench itself is Milwaukee Deep, which at 27,480 feet below sea level makes it the deepest point in the whole of the Atlantic. The exact location of this lowest point was only confirmed by a study in 2018, and it was in the same year that Victor Vescovo became the first person to pilot a submarine into it. While the Puerto Rico Trench doesn't at first seem to be structurally different to other sea trenches around the world, it's been the source of conspiracy theories for quite some time. Measurements by NASA have found that there's a mass beneath the trench that's so incredibly dense it actually increases the gravitational pull on the ocean above it and causes it to dip, as well as interfering with the accuracy of navigational equipment. It's not entirely clear what could be causing this and what the mass is made of, but future exploration missions are planned to try to determine the answers. Number 7. Isul Gosawara Trench. The Isul Gosawara Trench is a formation in the western Pacific Ocean that's actually made up of two trenches, the Isul Trench to the north and the Bonin Trench to the south. It's on the border of the Pacific Ring of Fire and actually connects with two other trenches, the Japan Trench and the Mariana Trench. It formed because of the interaction between the Pacific Plate, which is subducting beneath the Philippine Sea Plate, and at its deepest is 32,087 feet beneath sea level. As it's quite close to Japan, there's interest about the tectonic activity in the trench and the risk it poses to the mainland. The Isul Gosawara Trench has been explored much more than most others, and the wealth of life within it has been a complete surprise. A study in 1999 which saw an unmanned deep-sea vehicle dive into the depths discovered a colony of sea lilies on the bed at a depth of around 29,500 feet, which had previously been thought impossible because of the extreme pressures and lack of light. It was because of this find that researchers realized that trenches are where large amounts of organic matter from the oceans are swept into, and it's these deposits that sustain life. Number 6. Kermadec Trench. The South Pacific Ocean is a region covered in volcanoes. Due to the active plate tectonics, and the undersea terrain is just as eventful. To the northeast of New Zealand's North Island is a deep-sea formation called the Kermadec Trench, which is a 620-mile-long depression that stretches between Louisville's Seamount Chain in the north and the Hikurangi Plateau in the south. It began to form many millions of years ago when the Pacific Plate began to subduct beneath the Australian Plate in what is one of the fastest-moving tectonic regions on Earth, with around 2 inches of movement per year. As a coincidence of the shape of the plates, the Kermadec Trench is surprisingly straight, and it's because it's so far away from any large land masses, there's very little sediment in it. Its deepest point has been measured at 32,963 feet below sea level. But it's quite possible there's an even deeper place in the trench that's yet to be discovered. This is one trench that remains somewhat of a mystery, as very few explorations have taken place. One trip in 2014 ended in disaster when the unmanned submersible imploded at a depth of 32,775 feet, and another research trip found something that's yet to be explained. At a depth of around 27,000 feet, they found a species of ray-finned pearlfish, but up until that point, the deepest they'd ever been seen was 6,600 feet. This could either mean there's a whole ecosystem down there that's developed separately to marine environments elsewhere in the world, or that this particular individual managed to find itself extremely far away from where it should have been. Number 5. Kuril Kamchatka Trench. The Kuril-Kamchatka Trench is another deep-sea trench in the northwest Pacific Ocean, where it begins off the southern coast of the Russian Kamchatka Peninsula and follows the Kuril Island chain before connecting with the Japan Trench. Most of the geographical features in the region, including the trench, an arc of volcanoes, and the Kuril Islands, were formed by the subduction of the Pacific Plate beneath the Okhotsk Plate. The trench is 1,800 miles north to south, and at its deepest point reaches 34,587 feet below sea level. It covers a huge area of around 102,000 square miles and has an unusual structure in comparison to other trenches because it has extremely steep slopes that are occasionally broken up by steps and terraces. As with other trenches in the region, the movement of the tectonic plates at its base are also responsible for powerful earthquakes and tsunamis, with 10 quakes in the past century measuring more than a magnitude 8. It's fortunate then that very few people live on the Kuril Islands or the Kamchatka Peninsula, because if those regions were densely populated as Japan, there would have almost certainly been a devastating loss of life. Number 4. Philippine Trench. The 820-mile-long Philippine Trench is in the Philippine Sea region of the western Pacific Ocean and stretches from the country's largest island, Luzon, to the Indonesian island of Halmahera. Thought to have formed within the last 9 million years, it's the result of the collision of the Palawan and Zamboanga tectonic plates, which continue to move several inches against each other per year. Unlike many other trenches, the Philippine Trench is one that's considered to have low seismic activity, despite being where the 2012 Samar earthquake emanated from, and has only been linked with one quake that registered more than a magnitude 8 that took place in 1924. The deepest part of the trench, known as the Galthea Depth, was first discovered by a German research vessel in 1912 and was confirmed by a Danish expedition in 1951 to be 34,580 feet below sea level. This makes it the third deepest oceanic trench on Earth, and as a result of continual explorations that happen there, it's also been a place that's taught researchers a lot about the wide variety of deep-sea organisms that can survive in such an extreme environment. Number 3. Tonga Trench. Stretching for around 850 miles between the Tonga Ridge and the Kermadec Trench, the Tonga Trench is the deepest oceanic trench in the southern hemisphere and the second deepest trench on Earth. The region is made up of several small plates, and the trench itself is the result of the Pacific Plate subducting beneath the Tongan Plate, and to a lesser extent the Kermadec Plate. It's one of the fastest moving systems in the world, with a convergence speed of up to 9.4 inches per year being measured in the northern part of the depression, and this results in the most active region of deep focus earthquakes in the world. It has an average width of about 50 miles and has an average depth of about 20,000 feet, but at one point, known as Horizon Deep, it plunges to 35,509 feet below sea level, a measurement that was confirmed when, in 2019, Victor Vescovo became the first person to pilot a vehicle to the seabed as a part of the 5 Deeps expedition. Number 2. Mariana Trench. Around 124 miles to the east of the Mariana Islands in the Pacific Ocean is the 1,580-mile-long Mariana Trench, which is home to 2 of the 3 deepest oceanic places on Earth. It's shaped like a crescent and is on the border of the Pacific Plate and the Mariana Plate, where the ancient Pacific Plate, which at its edge is an estimated 145 million years old, is being thrust beneath the much younger Mariana Plate. This process has formed the trench and the nearby volcanic islands, and has created something that's so deep that if you were to put Mount Everest into it, there'd still be more than a mile of water above its peak. The third deepest place in the Earth's ocean is called the Serena Deep, and was only discovered in 1997 to descend 35,151 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. But the deepest point of all is called Challenger Deep, which is a small valley in the floor that's 36,037 feet, or 6.82 miles deep. Several expeditions have managed to see manned submersibles reach the bottom, most recently the 5 Deeps expedition in 2019, which is an extraordinary feat considering how inhospitable it is. At such depths, the water pressure is more than 1,071 times that of the surface, which means that the water's density is actually increased by almost 5%. Temperatures in Challenger Deep have been measured at between 34 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes it all the more surprising that simple life forms have been found thriving down there. The Mariana Trench is seen as such an important geographical feature that a large part of it has been designated as a marine national monument by the U.S. to protect the land and water inside it. But bizarrely, the boundary of this monument ends just before Challenger Deep, which sits outside of it. Number 1. Kola Super Deep Borehole. We hear so much of the space and nuclear arms races that took place between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but the 2 countries were competing on a lesser-known front during that time as well. The attempt to drill the deepest ever hole, and hopefully one that would reach beyond the Earth's crust. While American interest waned, the Soviets continued with their quest, and the result was the Kola Super Deep Borehole in the Murmansk Oblast district of Russia. By the time drilling ended in 1989, it was measured at 40,230 feet deep, or 7.619 miles, which makes it by far the deepest point on Earth, surpassing even Challenger deep in the Mariana Trench by more than 4,000 feet. This wasn't just a vanity project, though, because scientists were keen to find out what conditions were like so far down and further understand what's down there. In the end, they managed to make it about a third of the way through the planet's top layer, and the project was forced to end because things started getting very strange indeed. Plankton fossils were found about 4 miles down. Rocks that had formed around 2,500 million years ago were found at the bottom, and huge quantities of boiling hydrogen were unexpectedly released. Workers reported hearing eerie noises coming from the hole, which soon became known as the entrance to hell, and things started heating up far quicker than predicted. The original plan was to keep on drilling, but at the depth they reached, the temperature was exceeding 356 degrees Fahrenheit instead of the expected 212 degrees, and this not only ruined any equipment that was sent down, but also caused the rock to behave in a plastic-like manner, which proved to be incredibly difficult to drill through. Finally, the attempt had to be halted, and a cap was placed over the top, but it's hoped that one day, once technology has advanced further, the attempt to drill through the crust may be restarted once more to finally answer the questions they originally tried to explore. Watch our Obscure playlist for more top 15 videos about the more obscure subjects in our world. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best and most obscure videos.